is an objective in itself. But it is also a kind of self-examination. After consulting a mass of new evidence, what remains of my former understanding of the Soviet phenomenon? How has it changed? Where did it err? Most of what I say in the forthcoming sections answers these questions, as the new materials revealed things I knew little about and allowed me to formulate problems I could not raise before. The other privileged source in these chapters is current work by Russian scholars who either have access to first-hand information or have worked in governmental institutions or who were already writing knowledgeably and critically in Soviet times. I also thought that listeners would benefit from the opportunity to get a feel for what these sources consist in, what they say, and what the regime knew or could know on the basis of the information communicated by its various agencies. In order to lay bare the building blocks of my interpretation and offer listeners a sample of what Soviet leaders were themselves reading, I have therefore both summarized and quoted extensively from these documents and authors. Thus it turns out that although society was poorly informed, and often seriously misinformed, the regime, especially in the post-Stalinist period, often had at its disposal a mass of good material, and in addition rigorous analyses of the country and of the outside world. But good information never helps mediocre leaders. The problem lay in what these leaders were able to understand, what they wanted to know, what they did know, even if they were incapable of doing anything with it, but also in what they had absolutely no desire to know. These questions take us to the heart of our inquiry into the Soviet system's mechanisms and underpinnings. Introduction. Power games and personal ambitions are part of history. They also exert strong pressure for history to be written in such a way as to serve interests or causes. From its inception, the Soviet regime presented a radical challenge, which was reinforced during the Cold War with the polarization of the world and the arms race, and the ensuing unprecedented propaganda war. All this created the conditions in which propaganda was readily mistaken for analysis. Both sides paid a heavy price for this fallacy, impairing their own ability to understand themselves and the world around them. The Soviet Union, which prohibited free social, political, and historical research, was more damaged. It was also much poorer. Ideological frenzy, with its natural bent for propaganda, cost the USSR dearly in terms of its ability to grasp its own, and global, reality, and to respond with appropriate strategies. During the 1960s and 70s, the Soviet leadership did in fact allow some scope for published, and particularly unpublished, research and debate. It created high-quality research institutes, which enabled it to learn about the other side. Given its democratic character, in the U.S. statistics and all sorts of information about the country were available, and this was helpful to the Soviets, notably from the 1960s onwards, when they were ready to use such data. In fact, specialists provided leaders with a sufficiently accurate picture of both the external world and Russia itself. What was done with this knowledge is another story. It depended on the leader's conservative mentality. Even so, at various stages the USSR was ready to play the card of peaceful coexistence and reduce tension. Aware of its inferiority, especially in the final stages of its history, it sought to implement policies that reflected a realistic appreciation of things. In the U.S., the fact that independent research could be pursued and alternative ideas and positions debated did not necessarily mean that they counted. After all, freedom to publish critical analyses is not everything. It then has to be asked, who pays any attention to them? Some analyses served as a cover for dubious policies and misconceptions, which were supposedly true simply by virtue of originating in the free world. A single illustration will suffice at this point. A group of specialists who have analyzed the work of the U.S. intelligence services maintain that an organization like the CIA, and in their turn the leadership circles dependent on it, incorrectly assessed the strengths and weaknesses of the Soviet Union. In any event, it did not have a clue about where the USSR was headed. Yet it was capable of listening in on Brezhnev's phone conversations and, in all likelihood, of counting the exact number.